Super. Like JP said, if you haven't caught it, catch it on YouTube the last 3 weeks. Gonna penultimate week, so I've got this week and next week. I want to finish off this series without question. And for you guys who haven't been involved and haven't been here for the last few weeks, I'm redoing a series that I've done like 8 or 9 years ago, something like that, around the topic. But it is a series that I stole all the content and all the principles from another speaker, one of my favorites from the United States. And it's something that impacted my life so much that I decided I'd steal some of the content and actually deliver it in a package for our church 8 years ago. And I've repackaged it again for you guys because I think it is so important. And we are asking the question, this simple question, and we're still asking this question, and some of you are annoyed at me that you're having to ask this question. Someone already complained at me this morning. I had Phil in my head. Is this question: what is the wise thing for me to do? Every opportunity, every invitation, every element of our life. What is the wise thing for me to do? We looked about what's the wise way to spend our time, and we're basing it around the scripture in Ephesians that Paul wrote. Ephesians 5, 15 to 17. I'm going to read from the International Standard Version. The whole series is framed around this. It says this: so then, be careful how you live. Great advice. Do not be unwise, but wise. Some translations say, live as wise, not unwise. Do not be unwise, but wise, making the best use of your time, because the times are evil. It says, therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. There's a juxtaposition there saying, don't be foolish. The Lord's will for you is never foolish. Do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. And so when we look back, because I have asked the question a couple of times, who've made some really dumb decisions, and everyone put their hand up. And then last week, I think it was, I asked who made some dumb decisions and knew that it was dumb at the time of making that decision, and everyone put their hand up. We all make dumb decisions, foolish decisions, often, and we often know that it's foolish too. But sometimes when we look back on our greatest regret, and maybe you've got a handful in your head, and maybe you wouldn't use the term regret perhaps, but the things that have caused the biggest devastation, the things that had the worst outcomes, but your greatest regrets, and maybe some of them are sinful and wrong, or maybe some of them things just turned out not very good and weren't sinful or wrong to do. But when you look back at them, you might often say to yourself, and maybe not in these words, but you might say to yourself, I should have seen it coming. I should have seen that one coming. I should have seen it coming. Whatever that thing was, you should have seen it coming. And we'll get back to that in a minute. Because I want to think of us. We're going to enter a fictitious scenario at the minute, and let's have a look at the room. We've got a few young people in the room, and the younger you are, and this is quite a grown-up concept and topic that I'm going to talk about in the next few seconds. But it's fine that you're young in here, because if you can learn this lesson early, can I tell you, this will set you up for life. And so I want you to imagine yourself. I don't care if you're a man or woman in here. I want to imagine yourself as a married man. And if you're a young girl at the minute, you might think, I've struggled to imagine that. But I want you to imagine yourself as a married man. And your party line to everything is, there's nothing wrong with whatever the thing is that's coming next. There's nothing wrong with the thing that you're doing. There's nothing sinful or wrong or immoral with the decisions that I'm making. And that's what comes out of your mouth. For instance, you're at work, you work in an office, you work in a factory, you work in somewhere where there's lots of other people, and a decision that you might make as a married man is to have lunch. Oh, who likes lunch? Love lunch, sandwich. I'm off like wheat and stuff. I don't do any grains or anything like that because it just makes my body hurt. And about a week ago, I said to Steph, I want a sandwich. I was getting emotional. I'm not an emotional man. So I really want a sandwich. I want a turkey sandwich with lettuce and mayo and sweet chili and salt and pepper and butter. And I was getting all emotional about it. And I was like, I'm having one. And the next day I felt like I'd been hit by a train. It was not worth it. It was not the wise thing for me to do. But having lunch, there's nothing wrong with having lunch. But maybe having lunch with a female colleague at work as a married man. And it's easy for me because the only female colleague I have is my wife. So this isn't a decision-making process I have to enter into. But having lunch with a female colleague, you know, you work together. As a married man, you might say, well, we're chatting through a work idea. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong, nothing sinful, nothing immoral, nothing wrong with lunch. There's nothing wrong with... I had lunch with the pastor once. There's nothing wrong with lunch. And so there's nothing wrong in it. And you'd be right. There's nothing wrong in it. Or perhaps you had, as a married man, the same dude, you had dinner with that same female colleague, but it was out in a group with all the colleagues were coming, everyone was coming, and then lots of people cancelled, and it ended up just being a couple and you and this other female colleague, and it just ends up being, and there's nothing wrong with going, nothing wrong with that. You saying there's something wrong with dinner, Phil? Is there something wrong with dinner? Is there something immoral about dinner, Phil? Jesus ate dinner. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with just dinner. And working late, we had to work late. There's nothing wrong with working late together with a colleague. That's what we're paid to do, is to work. And sometimes we have to work late. There's nothing wrong with that. All our teams work late, all together, all the time. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And maybe that's right. And there's nothing wrong with confiding in her when, you got, as a married man, got a problem in your family or within your marriage or relationships. There's nothing wrong with confiding in her. Things are tough at home and you tell her a few issues. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with confiding in a friend. In fact, Phil, I think you spoke about a few weeks ago, you should build friendships and share as a man, because men don't have any friends hardly ever in today's society. You should be sharing your emotions and feelings with people. It's a good thing to do. You told me to do it. I wrote it down. It's in my book. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. That's not morally wrong, Phil. There's nothing wrong with listening to her. Nothing wrong with listening to her when she's moaning about her boyfriend, and what a loser he is, because he is. Nothing wrong with doing that. Or when she's off work sick, you hear she's poorly. There's nothing wrong with dropping by, just dropping in some flowers or something. When I was a kid, I used to go with mum and dad. We used to drop by. We just drop by and see people. Do you remember doing that? You used to drop by. Don't do it as often anymore. Just drop by and say hello. What for? Don't know. Just saying hello. We used to do that as kids. Mum and dad in the car, go drop by, see granddad, see grandma. There's nothing wrong with dropping by, Phil. I'm just dropping by. They're sick. I'm just dropping by. You're saying there's something wrong, immoral, and wrong and sinful of dropping by and seeing somebody. Isn't that being kind, Phil? In fact, that's loving thy neighbour, Phil. I'm doing the work of Christ. There's nothing wrong with a hug. There's nothing wrong with a hug. Hugs are good. Who's a hugger in here? Oh, hugs are good, aren't they? Until you hug a non-hugger. Hugs. There's nothing wrong with a hug, Phil. You're telling me there's something wrong with a hug? I hug my grandma. Are you saying there's something wrong with a hug, Phil? And on and on and on and on and on and on. And if you were watching your favourite TV soap, whether American soaps in here or British soaps in here, they're all the same. They're all rubbish. If you're watching your favourite soap, you're watching EastEnders, some of you love EastEnders, and you were watching this plot play out, you know what's coming, right? You already know what's coming. It's like the third thing in. You're like, I see what they're writing in the plot here. I know what's happening. I know what's going to happen. You don't even need to watch the show. You know what's going to happen. Because we understand and we get this. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. That bad moral decisions are generally preceded by a series of unwise decisions. That are really bad, even what you consider, and I'll let you work that out, what you consider bad or immoral or sinful, even what you consider, let alone what God considers, when that happens, when that decision is made, bad moral decisions are generally preceded. It means it comes before it. It's preceded by a series, a line, lots of unwise choices in a row before you take the step into something wrong or immoral or bad. So we get closer and closer and closer to the edge of wrong. We haven't crossed the line. I haven't done anything wrong. That's not right. You're saying a hug's wrong. You're saying dropping by is wrong. We're getting closer and closer. And if someone calls you on it and be like, what are you doing, mate? Phil, what are you doing? With all these items I can see on this list, there's nothing wrong with. What are you doing? You are a muppet. And you'd be like, I've done nothing wrong. It's fine. There's nothing wrong. And yet we understand with this creeping towards bad choice or immoral or wrong or sin is that this little slow, steady creep of unwise choice, nothing wrong, Nothing wrong or sinful about it, but an unwise choice after unwise choice, creeping and creeping closer until we're on the precipice, until we're right on the edge of making a wrong or bad or immoral or sinful choice. And this step is tiny. And if we're over here, there's such a chasm between us and the bad moral choice that to make that step, we'd never do it in our right mind. And yet these unwise choices leading us towards the edge, right on that line. And this can be any area. And my example was that married man, but it could be in finances, it could be in faith, it could be in marriage, relationships, whatever it is. And it didn't happen all at once, but at the end of a series of unwise decisions. All of a sudden it went from unwise, just to plain wrong. In our scenario that I was painting there, the step into wrong is a tiny step probably for some, and all it takes is one last final step into what the Bible would describe as adultery. And it seems so far from where perhaps this character was that we were pretending we were. But that is adultery, and where there's devastation. I've never seen where that's occurred, in that wrong, that sin, what God says you've missed the mark there, without a big fallout and devastation that comes from it. Even though that can be healed and put back together and people can get through that, there's always consequences from it, and some of them last a long, long time. And so, if this happened to you, if this scenario happened to you, you'd no doubt say, I should have seen it coming. If this happened to you, you might think that. And maybe it has happened to you, or maybe it's happened to people you know, or maybe this has never happened to you, but one of your biggest regrets, some of the biggest mistakes in your life, have the same pattern of these unwise choices leading to a wrong or bad decision. And you'd say, I should have seen it coming. And your biggest regrets, my biggest regrets, if you think that, if you do actually acknowledge, I think I should have seen it coming, then honestly, somebody probably did. Just like someone watching the EastEnders of your life, the TV soap of your life, someone probably saw it coming. If you didn't see it coming, but you think you should have seen it coming, somebody probably did. I'd say it's pretty much guaranteed that someone in your life, a friend, family member, spouse, whoever, saw it coming. But either you didn't listen to them, or nobody warned you. Either you didn't listen when somebody tried to speak into your world about this topic or this area or this regret, or nobody dared warn you, perhaps because you'd ripped their head off, or perhaps they thought something else. Nobody warned you. Perhaps the reason they didn't tell you or warn you or ask you or approach you or question you is because they thought that you wouldn't, what? Listen. They thought you wouldn't listen. And it's funny with our biggest regrets, the things we do, all your mates, can I tell you, if you don't know this, all your mates have an analysis of your life. And a lot of your mates and your friends, your family, your spouse, all the other people can see things coming down the track that you can't see. And they're all talking about it. They're all talking about it. All your mates know he shouldn't do that. She should. What is he thinking? What is she thinking? Why is he taking that job? Why is he doing it? Why is he doing that? They're all talking, not in a gossipy way. I'm not talking about gossip. I'm talking about they're loving you and thinking, why on earth are they doing this? And I don't know how to approach them or tell them because they're not going to listen anyway. What's the point? I don't want to break this friendship. I don't want to ruin this because I'll be rejected or they'll get upset. But all your mates know you shouldn't be with that girl. Why are you marrying that bloke? What are you doing? And they all agree. But they all say, should we say something? Should we do? Are you going to say it? You should say that. You tell them. You're good at that sort of thing. Phil, you're too direct. You'll scare them off. You get someone else tell them. And everyone agrees, what's the point? They won't listen. The biggest regrets of your life, probably, not always, but probably someone saw it coming. And if somebody saw it coming, here's the question we need to ask ourselves is, why is it that we can't see it coming, but someone else can? Why is it sometimes we can't see it coming, but Many people in our world can see it coming, even if they never approach us or tell us or talk to us. And one reason is, and I love this and I stole this, is emotionally charged environments are not ideal for decision making. Emotionally charged environments, when you become emotional, and there'll be people in here who are super emotional all the time about everything. And this will be a very big problem for you, and you have to get that under control. For other of you in here who are a bit like me, a bit of a Vulcan, and I get told by my wife I have no emotion, it's not true. Just have a limited range, like my vocal range. I've got two. Happy or frustrated. They're my two. I joke, there is a third. I'm growing. But emotionally charged environments are not ideal for decision making. We know this, but just about every important decision that we make are in emotionally charged environments. The important ones, the big ones, the ones that are going to have the biggest impact, involve emotion, even if you're dead inside like me. The big important ones have that involved in the decision-making process. And in fact, our emotions make the obvious less obvious. And you know this if you've ever had a fight with your spouse. Emotion makes the obvious less obvious. And so if you're in the middle of a difficult time, whatever that looks like, a storm in your world, whatever that is, and you're thinking, what shall I do? And you're there and you're thinking, oh, I'm in a difficult, I've got these options. What on earth shall I do? I don't know what to do. Anyone ever been there? I don't know what to do. I don't know what the choices that I should do going forward. And all your friends think, really? You don't know what to do? Some of your friends think you're stupid because of this. Because the emotions make the obvious less obvious. They're like, the choice is really obvious and you don't know. Simply, emotions make decisions difficult, or make wise decisions difficult. And all of our major decisions involve emotion. So, are you ready to be insulted and offended? This is why I'll do a much better job at managing your money than you ever will. And some of you are like, yeah, because I'm rubbish at managing money. But some of you are very good at managing money. But it's probably why, for most people in the room, I would manage your money better than you manage your money. And I'm pretty good at that sort of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing about my wife for you. Don't employ her as an accountant. But probably I would do better at managing your money than you would. Because I'd never make an impulse buy for you. I'd never make an impulse buy on behalf of you. My third child, Skylar, so she's 5, and some of you got kids who are like this. Every shop, can I have that? Can I have that dolly? Can I have that dolly? And I'm like, you got like 400 dollies. No, I say, no, we don't need a dolly, darling. Got lots of dollies, darling, haven't we? Don't need another dolly. You've got 3 of that dolly. Because every time Nanny Claire goes out with her, she buys the same dolly. We've got hundreds of dollies, but Skylar, she's emotionally attached to the dolly. I want the new dolly. And as parents, we find it really easy. Some of us find it really easy to say, no. No, you're not having the dolly. Especially as a dad. Can I tell you, as a dad, I find it very easy to say, no, you don't need a dolly. Why? Because I don't like dollies. If it's Joel in a remote control car, I might be swayed. Because I might be able to play with that a bit. But with a dolly, I'm not emotionally attached to the dolly. I'm slightly emotionally attached to my child, but I'm not emotionally attached to the purchase. And so it's easy as a parent to say, no, you're not having it. You don't need it. You just want it. It's an emotionally driven purchase that you get home and you won't be bothered about. So we find that really, really easy. But as soon as we get emotions attached to a thing, like let's use, maybe for the blokes in the room, maybe you're prone to make a bad financial decision if you walk into Curry's and they've got a new 70-inch latest LED TV. There's one in there now. Honestly, I went in there the other day, and I was like, the picture's more real than real life. And I don't know how they do that. It's like wizardry. There's more I don't understand. They can make more detail on the screen than in real life. And you can just see the blokes like dribbling at it. Telly. Honestly, it's the same as Dolly. That's what we're doing. We're shouting, Dolly, Mummy, can I have one? And we become emotionally attached to this electronical product. And the thing is, if you saw that, and that you think the picture, you can rationalize it all. The picture is epic. It's so much better than the telly that we've got. The built-in sound system is the best on the market. I've read all the reviews on Google. It is the best thing. There's another telly that's twice the price that's not as good. Therefore, that's a good deal. I won't get into that. But you're someone who loves gadgets. You're someone who spends a lot of time watching movies. You love that sort of thing. It's emotional to you. Even if you wouldn't articulate that. It's emotional to you. And yet, if I controlled your debit card, I'd just go, no. Phil, can I have that? No. We're going for a coffee instead. I'd just say, no, you're not having it. Why? Because you don't need it. I've been around your house. You have a 42-inch LCD, old school, wind up, black and white, plasma. You got an old, it works fine. It does the job. You love watching movies on that. You don't need it. You're just emotionally attached to this thing. You're already in debt. I'm not gonna allow that because I'm not emotionally attached to it. I'm not gonna get to see it. So no. And I'd find that very, very easy. And if I'm honest, a little bit fun. But I would make way better, wiser choices with regard to your finances, probably, than you. But the same thing is true in the reverse. You'd probably do the same in the reverse. Maybe not some of you in the room, because I know some of your habits. You would buy me a dolly. And the reason is because financial decisions they're not emotionally neutral. They are emotional, and the bigger the amount, the more emotional they are. And it's the same in marriage. There's no different. You look in... I'm going to say things that people don't say. I have a habit of doing this. You can look into another person's relationship and easily solve their problems. You can see a best friends or family, your sister, your brother-in-law, whoever, and you see the problems in their marriage, and you could write in 2 sentences what they need to do to fix what they've got going on. And there'll be hidden things and deep things that maybe, and nuances to that you couldn't, but the major things, you could easily be like, that's the issue, just stop doing that. You know, you could listen to him, well, she does this, she does that. When she does that, it makes me feel like I don't like it. And your response would be, if you're a good counsellor like me, well, stop doing that then. And for the other person, but he does it. When he does that, it makes me feel like I don't feel. You just go, well, you stop doing that. So you stop that, you stop that. Sorted? It'd be like the quickest counselling session ever. 15 minutes, bang, $5,000. And we joke, but there's truth to that we can see them issues and problems in other people's relationships that they're blind to, and they can do it exactly the same with us. And it's obvious to friends, but not to you, because it's emotional. You're emotionally entangled, and if you're not emotionally entangled with your spouse, then maybe there's something wrong there. But that emotion brings a blindness to us often, where the obvious is less obvious. And so, I'm going to say this as well. It's the same with kids. You know exactly what your mates need to do to sort their kids out. When you see someone else's kids, if they just done this, then that would work. If only they would follow my parent advice. As your kids are climbing up the walls, doing different things in a different spectrum, but are suffering or backward in a different way than someone else's kids. All kids are weird. I've got enough of them, I know they are. They're all weird and they're all wonderful ways. And so we can see that, we can do that with other people's children. Even if you don't have kids, you can be so wise in some decision-making processes about other people's kids. Steph used to get in trouble about speaking to parents, saying, as a parent, you should do this, and it's a wise choice for your kids before we had kids. People are like, you don't know, you don't have kids. Is she wrong? No, she's right. But you can't, you're not allowed to say because you don't have them. My sister doesn't have kids. And she'll often come along and she'll say this, and the ladies in my family hate it, the blokes think it's hilarious. She'll say, kids are like dogs. And she'll say then, and here's the rule I follow when she's looking after our kids, like dogs. She carries all the lead, puts the food out on the floor. No, but some of the principles of parenting, she understands, and she'd make the wise choices because she's not as emotionally attached as you are as a parent, as a dad, as a mum who's knackered and got all the things juggling going on at once. And so, whatever it is, parenting It's emotional. Marriage is emotional. Money is emotional. And that's why we look back and think, why didn't I see it coming? That emotion blinded us and made the obvious less obvious. So, that in mind, as we wrap up and I'm only halfway through, is this. What is the wise thing to do when emotions are high? What is the wise thing to do when emotions are high? And I mean this in the positive and the negative. Because you can be taken down a whirlwind of unwise choices that lead to devastation through positive emotion, just as you can with negative emotion. Just ask someone who suffers with bipolar who's on a high. Then positive emotions can lead you somewhere you don't want to go. And so, what is the wise thing to do when emotions are high? The answer is one word, really simple: listen. It's to listen. Because in the past, in that area of your life, you didn't see it coming, but I guarantee someone else saw it coming, and so we need to listen. And I love this nugget, is that wise people recognize when they're not in a condition to decide for themselves by themselves. And this sounds really insulting to an adult, doesn't it? That a wise person, the wisest person in this room, will understand and recognize when they're not in a condition, when they're not in the position emotionally to decide for themselves by themselves. They need someone else's input. And depending how you wired in here, depending on your personality makeup, you'll push back harder against this than others. But wise people hit the pause button and they acknowledge this is emotional. What I'm emotional about this decision. And they understand, because I'm emotional, I'm probably going to make the wrong decision. And we understand if I make the unwise decision enough times in a row because I'm emotional about it, it will end up to wrong. It'll end up to sin. It'll end up to immoral. It'll end up to devastation. And so you might think, uh-oh, I'm mad. And so I need advice. And can I tell you, I've done this quite a lot in the past. Not so much in the last few years, but I remember a long time ago, someone who was in the church, in fact, I had a meeting with them, and they made me so angry. And I'm not someone who's angered easily. I hang around with Matt all the time, and he's really annoying, and I never get annoyed with him and angry. But this person angered me so much that it sort of took me back to BC before Christ, where I'd rip your head off and drive your head into the ground. Honestly, I was like, I'm going to pick him up, and I'm going to drive his, like rugby tackle into the... It's illegal in rugby, you're not allowed to do it. But I'm very good at it. And I was angry. I was angry with him. And it's because of the things he was saying weren't logical, were driven from emotion. And I couldn't understand why he was being so irrational and illogical and emotionally driven about it. And yet that in here made me angry. And we finished the meeting and I was like, I want to kill someone. And so what I did, I called a mate at the time and said, can I come and talk to you? And they was like, yeah, come around. And I just went around and went, rah! And I told them everything that was happening, and they were like, actually, no, you are right, 90% of that, but have you thought about this with this bit? And I was just like, oh, yeah, flipping. But I love it, and I had just something the other week, about a week ago, where someone had the same thing, was angered about something, and called me and said, I just need to talk about it. I just need to talk and just ask some advice about it. And they knew everything of the situation. They just needed someone to bounce off. And I've done that, and I've done it before when I'm hurting, and it's been very rare in my life where I've been in a place where I'm in real hurt and in need emotionally like that. And I've gone to people on their doorstep and been like, I need to talk. I need to talk about this because I'm emotional, and the decisions I've got to make, I don't know how to make without making the wrong one. And so we all have examples in our life when we should have seen it coming, and somebody probably saw it coming, and the answer is to listen to someone who does know. And Solomon, we're getting to the Bible now. Solomon, the third king of Israel, David's son, was considered the wisest man in all of, I think Jesus wrote and said he was the wisest man on all of the planet. And it's not fair, because it says in Scripture that God gave him that wisdom. So that's not fair. Most of us have to work it out on the way. But it was during the most affluent time of Israel's history. They're in a really strong and good place. And we'll read it from 1 Kings 4, 29 to 30. It says this: God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measures as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East. He's a wise dude. And greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. So kings would actually come and visit him, and they'd wait in line to just get a moment, to get an audience with the king, to be able to say, hey, king, this is our situation. Have you got some advice? And he had an impeccable judgment in science, in maths, in the arts. He was just an all-rounder, brilliant, wise man. And he'd even tell you how to cut babies in two when two women are arguing over a baby. If you know the story. If you don't know your Bible, read up on it. But the good news is he was so wise. The good news is you don't have to get in line. He's gone now. He's dead. He's gone. We can't get in that line. But he wrote loads of stuff down for us. Loads of it in Proverbs. And Solomon said in Proverbs 9:9, he said this, instruct the wise and they will be wiser still. And that just sounds sensible to me. Instruct the wise and they'll be wiser still. Proverbs 1:5 says, a wise man will hear and increase in learning. And a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel, will seek out. And I think this is funny. It's like saying a wise person will seek out counsel. And I think naturally in our world now, where we're told we're all brilliant and everyone's amazing and you're good the way you are. And if you're told I'm wise, well, why do I need to seek counsel? I am the wise one. Why would I seek counsel? But Solomon, the wisest man of all time, says that a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. So you're already wise. The wise person seeks wise counsel because they understand they're not quite wise enough. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the wisest man in the world wrote more about seeking counsel than any other of the ancient writers across all of history, all of the biblical writers. The person who was considered the wisest wrote more about seeking counsel, seeking advice, asking other people, listening to other people than anybody else. Because the wisest man in the world knew that some things in life you're not going to see coming. But if you invite others into your world, they can bring, and it's annoying, they can bring such clarity you need to make wise decisions. In Proverbs 12:15 it says this. We learned about the fool last week. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. A fool says, I don't need outside advice. I know enough. I'm already wise enough. I don't need outside advice. I can see what's coming down the road. I can see everything. And if we think like that and feel like that and act like that, I think we're going to pay for it further down the road. Proverbs 15:22, just so many nuggets of wisdom. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. With many advisors they succeed. The plans you have for your hopes, your future, your dreams in the future, like we talked about in the first week, them plans that you have will fail for lack of counsel, but will succeed if you have many advisors. So the wisest man in all of the world says, get many advisors. Don't go it alone. And us blokes particularly, we don't even like asking for directions. We feel like we want to do it alone. We want to be right. We want to be the one who gets things right, to know, to understand, to give out information and be the source of wisdom, the oracle. But Solomon would say, don't think you're so smart. In Proverbs 19:20 it says this, listen to advice, and I like this, accept discipline. Listen to advice and accept discipline. Check this, and at the end, you will be counted among the wise. So in the end, in your future hopes and dreams that you're trying to achieve, at the end of that, if you listen to advice and even accept discipline, then you'll be counted among the wise. So, I think, and maybe you'll disagree with me, but to make wise choices, you have to accept that you're not all that wise. And even Solomon, the wisest man in all the world, would argue that, I believe. And we need to borrow from a pool of wisdom. Borrow from the pool of wisdom of many advisors. And I think that's real wisdom. And so some of you might be sat here thinking, yeah, wow, Phil, radical advice. You spent 30 minutes to say, ask advice. It's just that's not deep enough spiritually. So why don't we do it? So few of us, so little of the time, actually do it. Why do we not seek advice? I think it's two reasons. One, because we think we know what's best. and everyone else around you thinks an idiot, so why ask? Or we want people to think we know what's best. Either we actually think we know what's best, or we want other people to think that we know, but we can't reveal that we don't know something. And both of them are rooted, sadly, in pride. That's all it is. It's pride. Not being able to ask advice, to seek help, to say, hey, I know this is outside of my expertise, my remit. I don't get it. I don't know. And the sad thing of the story of Solomon is in the long term, if you know your Bible well, he starts ignoring his own advice. He starts ignoring his own advice. And he starts going it on his own. And he's thinking, well, if I'm the wisest man in the world, why am I asking other people for advice when everyone comes to me? I want you to think about this, how difficult it must be if you are the wisest person and everyone you know comes to you for advice. How it could be so easy to go, well, why would I go to other people for advice? Because I am actually the best at this thing. I want you to think about that. Because it was his success that actually bred that pride. And the result was that he made dumb decisions that the next generation of his family and the next generation of the nation was set up for failure, and it was tragic. And it says in Proverbs 13:10 that where there is strife, there is pride. You know, thinking that you've got it all together. But wisdom is found in those who take advice. And I want you to think about that with Solomon, with that danger of that success, of actually being wise. And there's dangers of success in whatever area you are. You can get trapped into thinking that I am wise. You know, maybe you're incredibly intelligent and you have a lot of knowledge. That can set you up and puff you up where you wouldn't listen to anybody else because no one knows as much as you. Or maybe you're an immense businessman, you're really successful, made lots of money, and you're very, very wise at business decisions. You can think, I'm such a wise guy. And yet, might not make wise decisions about relational issues, or family, or friends. But because of your success, it's built up a pride in you. You think you're wise. In fact, we know this, don't we? Many of the top, particularly men, sort of elites of the world who have built billion-dollar companies often end up alone. Or a string of young women, and you read later and find out unhappy. Because they can't take advice from anyone because they've built up, just like Solomon, this pride in actual success. Same with Solomon. He was so wise in areas, he became blind to his foolishness. In the areas of wisdom that he held, he was so wise that it blinded him to his areas of foolishness. And we all have them blind spots. And we all know people, and maybe you're one of them, but we all know people who you cannot correct, ever. That you can never say anything to them because they know already. We have people in the world, and if you don't know anyone in your world like that, it's probably you. But the more success you have in an area, in business or whatever it is where you consider it success, the less you feel the need to have advice, much less even seek advice, let alone just hear advice. And in fact, you're likely to resist counsel. I think that's true. Thinking I know what's best. And so, lastly, why we resist seeking counsel. Like I said, it's because we need others to think we know what's best. And so there's dangers in success, of actually being wise in an area. That can bring you dangers of then being blind to your foolishness. But needing other people to think that you're successful when you're not is difficult. And it's still rooted in pride. And because seeking advice is admitting to your mate, to your wife, to your staff, to your sergeant, to your boss, this is beyond me. This is beyond my capabilities. I don't know what decision to make. You're revealing your inability. Anyone love doing that? You're revealing an insecurity, perhaps. Anyone feel good about that? You're revealing an inadequacy. And for some people, that's the worst thing that they could ever do, is reveal they're inadequate in an area to a certain people group or to any other human being. Because it's humiliating. And pride won't let you feel that humiliation. It protects you from it. That pride in you will be like, I'm not letting you feel that. And so we're not revealing we don't know this thing. I can't ask anyone that because you're revealing how rubbish you are in this area. So you'd rather make the wrong choice and not feel humiliated by revealing your inadequacy. But in truth, the only way for you to emerge from an inadequacy, the only way for us to have success in an area where we might have failed in the past, is to invite someone else into that weakness and reveal it and be like, this is me. That's what I love about our Connect groups, especially our Connect group. Everyone's just like, here's me. Here's all my dumb decisions I've made. And it's scary to do that. Revealing vulnerability, revealing insecurity, revealing inadequacy, but it is wise when it's done right. So, with your major regrets, you've probably said to yourself again, I should have seen it coming. Well, I'm saying that I think somebody saw it coming, and somebody can see what you can't see. So, as we go full circle to ask the question, what is the wise thing for me to do? And in the past weeks, I've asked that about, you're asking yourself, what is the wise thing for me to do? But for me, what is the wise thing for me to do? The answer often is actually listen. And without question, if we are to live as wise as Paul wrote, when we don't know something, or when emotions are high in a situation, we should ask the other people this question. It's to actually ask, not yourself, what is the wise thing to do, although that's a great thing to do. When it falls out of our remit, when it falls out of our ability to make the wise choice, is actually to ask your mate, your husband, dare I say it, your wife, even your child, what is the wise thing for me to do? Asking somebody else, what is the wise thing for me to do? We should ask this question. And without question, if we do that, we'll live more godly lives, we'll be less foolish, and we'll live, as Paul says, as wise. Amen. Let's pray. Father, I just